millions know Laura Ingraham as fearless and unshakable on television, but behind the camera is a story marked by illness, loss, family betrayal, and controversy that few ever expected. Laura Ingraham is one of the most recognizable and outspoken figures on Fox News, sharp, confident, and rarely backing down. But away from the spotlight, her life has taken turns most viewers never saw coming. From a life-threatening cancer diagnosis to deep family conflict and public backlash, the story behind the persona is far more complex than it appears. So what really happened to Laura Ingraham? Long before her rise as host of the Ingraham Angle, Laura faced a shocking health crisis. In April 2005, at just 41 years old, she was diagnosed with early-stage invasive ductal carcinoma, an aggressive form of breast cancer discovered during a routine physical exam. A doctor found a lump that would change her life overnight. Rather than letting the diagnosis define her, Laura approached it with determination. She underwent 2 surgeries followed by weeks of chemotherapy and radiation. By October 2005, her treatment was complete. Less than a year later, she was back on air, reporting live from Baghdad in early 2006 while her hair was still growing back. Laura has always rejected the label cancer survivor. Instead, she calls herself a breast cancer thriver, saying she never stopped living her life. To her, the experience brought clarity rather than fear. She chose not to dwell on it and refused to let it overshadow her identity as a broadcaster or mother. The diagnosis cut deep, not only because of its gravity, but because it reopened a wound that had never fully healed. It came years after Laura had already endured one of the most devastating losses of her life, the death of her mother and Caroline Ingraham, who succumbed to lung cancer in 1999. Watching her mother slowly fade, day by day, was an experience Laura would later describe as more painful than facing her own illness. Cancer, she learned then, does not only attack the body. It tests faith, patience, and the meaning we attach to time. Her mother's battle reshaped Laura in lasting ways. Sitting beside hospital beds and listening to labored breaths taught her that ambition fades in the face of mortality, but love does not. From that moment on, Laura began to measure success differently. Presence mattered more than productivity. Relationships mattered more than recognition. She often speaks about how easily people overlook the miracle of having a parent still alive, reminding others that what feels permanent today can disappear without warning tomorrow. Anne's influence never left her. Even years later, Laura finds herself guided by the values her mother quietly lived by: honesty without cruelty, discipline without rigidity, humor in dark moments, and hard work without complaint. These principles became the foundation of Laura's own parenting. In moments of doubt, she still recalls the small, tender memories: handwritten notes tucked into drawers, witty greeting cards saved long after the occasion passed, and the familiar warmth of a mother who knew how to make hard days lighter. Yet, not all family bonds offered the same comfort. Laura's relationship with her older brother, Curtis Ingraham, stands in stark contrast. Where her mother's legacy brought unity and grounding, her relationship with Curtis has been marked by division and public conflict. Curtis, a California teacher who is openly gay, has repeatedly and openly criticized Laura's conservative beliefs. Over the years, his accusations of hypocrisy, intolerance, and divisiveness have spilled into interviews and social media, touching on issues ranging from immigration and gun violence to public health and race. For Laura, this rift has been another test of resilience. It forced her to confront the painful reality that shared blood does not always mean shared understanding. Yet even here, the lessons from her mother endure. Laura continues to believe that disagreement does not have to erase love, and that time, fragile and finite, should never be wasted on hatred. Through loss, illness, and family conflict, Laura's story becomes one of endurance. It is a reminder that strength is often forged quietly, shaped by grief, guided by memory, and sustained by the values we choose to carry forward. In 2018, a deeply personal family conflict spilled into the public eye. Curtis Ingraham, the brother of one of America's most recognizable television hosts, sat for an interview and used a word that stunned many people watching. He called his sister, Laura Ingraham, a monster. It wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration of emotional distance. Curtis claimed Laura's political commentary wasn't thoughtful or principled, but destructive. He accused her of spreading division rather than ideas, and he traced that behavior back to what he described as a troubled upbringing. According to Curtis, their father was abusive and held extremist beliefs, and he suggested those early experiences shaped Laura's confrontational worldview. For a family that once shared private bonds, these were explosive accusations, made not behind closed doors, but in front of a national audience. Curtis didn't stop there. He went on to position himself as what he called a sibling fact-checker, urging advertisers to boycott the Ingraham Angle. He accused Laura of racism, of sympathizing with extremist ideologies, and of betraying values she once held. The attacks were relentless, public, and deeply personal. What made the conflict even more jarring was the past the two siblings shared. In 1997, long before Laura became a primetime fixture on Fox News, she wrote an essay for The Washington Post that revealed a very different side of her. In it, she described how witnessing Curtis and his partner confront an AIDS diagnosis with courage and dignity had softened her views on homosexuality. It was a moment of empathy, growth, and humility, one that suggested love had expanded her perspective. Curtis later claimed that as Laura's media career accelerated, those views disappeared. He said he watched his sister transform into someone he no longer recognized, abandoning compassion for ideology. To him, it felt like a betrayal, not just of political beliefs, but of shared history. Laura's response to her brother's attacks was notably restrained. She said she was saddened by his comments and insisted many of his claims were untrue. Other siblings, she added, were equally shocked by what Curtis had said. She avoided escalating the conflict, choosing not to dissect family wounds on air. Sometimes silence speaks louder than rebuttal. But family tension wasn't the only storm Laura faced. By 2025, public criticism around her commentary had intensified. During a segment referencing an NBC News poll, Laura criticized Gen Z for ranking marriage and children lower on their list of life priorities. She questioned what that shift said about values, commitment, and the future of society. The backlash was swift. Critics pointed out what they saw as a glaring contradiction. Laura Ingraham had never been married. Now in her 60s, she was a single mother, someone who had built a family later in life, outside traditional norms. To many, her criticism sounded less like concern and more like judgment. But the full story was more complex. Laura's journey into motherhood didn't follow a conventional path, but it was deliberate and deeply personal. In 2008, she adopted her first child, Maria Caroline, from Guatemala. A year later, she adopted a son from Russia, Michael Dmitry. In 2011, she adopted another son, Nikolai Peter. All three adoptions happened while she was already a high-profile media figure, under constant scrutiny. She has said adoption was never about politics, optics, or ideology. To her, it was a moral responsibility, about children who needed stability, love, and a permanent home. Marriage, she believed, wasn't a prerequisite for motherhood. Commitment was. Balancing a demanding television career with single parenthood was anything but easy. Laura has described raising her children as the greatest challenge of her life, and also her greatest joy. She made a conscious decision to keep them largely out of the public eye, shielding them from the noise, criticism, and attention that came with her career. Her parenting style emphasized structure, presence, and emotional resilience. Smartphones were delayed until high school. Media consumption was tightly controlled. Nightly conversations were a ritual, time set aside to talk, reflect, and listen. In a world of constant distraction, she tried to create moments of grounding. Long before motherhood, Laura's life had already tested her resilience. In 2005, she was engaged to be married. Then came a cancer diagnosis that abruptly changed everything. The engagement ended, and after recovery, she chose a different path. Rather than re-entering the search for marriage, she focused on her career and, eventually, on becoming a mother. It wasn't the life she once imagined, but it became the life she built. Professionally, Laura's career has been defined as much by controversy as by influence. Her rhetoric has drawn accusations of echoing the Great Replacement theory. She faced advertiser boycotts after mocking Parkland shooting survivor David Hogg. Her "shut up and dribble" comment directed at LeBron James sparked national outrage and reignited debates about race, politics, and who gets to speak. Each incident brought backlash, sponsor losses, and fierce public debate. And yet, she remained on air. Unapologetic. Unmoved. Influential. To supporters, she represents defiance and conviction in an era of cultural conformity. To critics, she embodies division and provocation. Both sides agree on one thing: Laura Ingraham is impossible to ignore. But behind the headlines, beyond the soundbites and controversies, there is a life shaped by illness, adoption, fractured family ties, and hard choices. A woman who survived cancer, chose single motherhood, endured public condemnation, and navigated the painful reality of a brother who became her most vocal critic. Her story isn't clean. It isn't simple. And it isn't easily categorized. It's a reminder that public figures are more than their television personas, and that behind every confident voice is a lifetime of decisions, losses, and resilience that rarely make it on screen. Now you know the story behind the headlines. From life-threatening illness to adoption, family conflict, and relentless controversy, Laura Ingraham's life is far more layered than many people realize. So ask yourself this: which part of her story surprised you the most?